The envy of the DA, Leslie Wells, connection coach here. I help individuals heal, thrive, improve, repair, and connect more deeply in their romantic relationships. And I always look at things considering their attachments. If you're unfamiliar with the dismissive avoidant, then go back and look at some of my other videos where I go into depth about what a dismissive is, their characteristics, how to identify one. But for the purposes of this particular video, just know that a dismissive avoidant is someone who essentially one of the pieces of their childhood was emotional neglect. So these are individuals that grow up with very low emotional IQ. They do not have emotional attunement to other people around them. They do not pick up on their emotions, their needs, their wants, their desires naturally. They are missing those pieces because in childhood, they did not experience that themselves. And so dismissive avoidants, often the ones that I work with, sort of were thrown to the wolves as far as survival. So sometimes we have parents who really show up well for them. They're stay-at-home parents. They take them to their sporting events. They pack their lunches. They do all the things. They spend time with them. They're coaches of their softball and soccer leagues and all of the things, but they just miss the emotional piece. But I also see a lot of dismissive avoidance where they're essentially just kind of neglected, period. And even if their basic needs are met, they really sort of figure out that they have to do everything on their own and they're left to their own devices to survive. So they end up doing a lot of these things on their own. So they really go to this very self-centered place because essentially as a child, if no one else is going to care for you, you have to be the only one who cares for you. So they really get in this mindset of, I only have to focus on me and I'm going to focus on me because no one else is going to do it. So then when they get married, they sort of take that same blueprint into their marriage and they're really, really terrible about taking care of and providing and protecting for others because they've spent all of their life just having to worry about making sure their own basic needs are taken care of. They really were just built for survival, and that really translates over into their marriage. And because we see so many men that are dismissive avoidant, this can bring up a lot of things in marriage for the women. And I think we're seeing a lot of this with the quiet quitting that we see in marriages today. Because what ends up happening is dismissive avoidants also are triggered by their high stakes partner. Whenever there's a relationship that requires commitment, expectations, closeness, vulnerability, having to deal with conflict, you know, a marriage, a real actual relationship, when it gets to that point, they're triggered and they don't experience being triggered the same way or close off, shut down, withdraw to other people the same way that they do with their spouses. So I work with a lot of people who are great in business, CEOs, very accomplished individuals, very accomplished men, but whenever it comes to their spouses, they often have a hard time showing up in the same way in those things because it is your romantic relationships that triggers your attachment style the most. So dismissive avoidance, because they spend so much time alone in their own space and they find their safety being alone. So if no one is able to meet you when you have emotional needs, if they shut you down, criticize you, reject you, punish you, you learn to handle life on your own and you find safety in that solace and that space. So some of the things that are very important to dismissive avoidance are autonomy, space, lots of time alone, and they throw themselves into hobbies, accomplishments, achievements, and work rather than the romantic partners or their relationships because they're not good at that emotional piece and they don't have as much of a desire for it because it triggers them because it's so foreign to them. So a lot of times what I see when people are married, and especially when they have children, and this does tend to fall more for the women because there are dismissive avoidant women, but a lot of times men are brought up to be more avoidant. Particularly society plays into this too when we teach men to shut down their emotions and don't give them a safe space to actually experience those things and show up with vulnerability. So what I see a lot of times is women that have this sort of envy around their spouses. And again, there's dismissive avoidant women too. So this could be, you know, the opposite and be true of a man who's with a dismissive avoidant woman. I just see it more in women. And I think we're seeing it more as far as the divorce rate in women too. But essentially the woman gets to this place of sort of like this envy because here's the dismissive avoidant who will have rigid boundaries around their alone time. So they are spending a ton of time doing their hobbies, chasing their dreams. Sometimes finances are separate because they want that autonomy, that independence, and so they may not want to share finances. So they're often spending way more time doing the things that they enjoy, seeking their own dreams and really chasing after the things they want without any attention to what their spouse wants. So it's a very selfish thing, but it's something that comes from this place of survival. Now, there's no place for selfishness in marriage. So if you are with a DA or you are a DA, you absolutely have to work on this. But they essentially chase their own dreams, spend their money on things that are important to them, chase their own hobbies, focus on their own career, ambition, accomplishments, achievements, while not ever picking up on any of the emotional needs of their spouse, what their spouse desires, what they want for their life, what's important to them. They don't notice when their spouse is burdened because they're doing their time going off and doing the things that feel good and fill their cup and give them that space that they need, or they're running and distracting when they are triggered. They don't pick up on the things that their spouse needs, and a lot of times the spouse is at home picking up, carrying the mental load, the physical load, and doing a lot of the things around the house while also working, managing the children, running them around to their sporting events, while the DA is off doing the things that make them feel good without even realizing that their partner is sinking or drowning, because they do not pick up on emotional cues, because they have emotional blinders on. They miss those neural connections in their childhood. So a lot of times the spouse can look at the DA and be like, I'm so jealous. Like, I wish that was the life that I got. They don't have to tend to the child emotional needs because they're not good at that. So you're managing the children's emotions, you're managing everybody's emotions to make sure everybody is cared for, nurtured, they have all their needs met. And a lot of times the spouse is the one that's like working, taking care of the house, doing the kid stuff, while their partner's out doing the things that make them feel good. And so it really creates this level of unfairness that can eventually turn into quite a deep root of bitterness and resentment if not dealt with. We can't control our partner. We can't change your attachment style. We can only show up ways that honor ourselves. And we really, if we just look at our partner and we're like, why are we putting up with this? And we go to this place of anger, that really doesn't help anything. It's not an empowering place. And again, you can't change your partner. And a lot of people are like, well, I wouldn't put up with that. Just leave. Why would you put up with that? But you chose this partner. You may not have known their attachment style, but now that you're stuck with it, you have to control what you can control. And so the very first step in this is you have to examine why you are self-abandoning your own needs and people pleasing and pointing to other people instead of taking care of yourself and not giving those things back to yourself. You really have to start with your relationship to self and your own attachment style, because you probably have some anxious attachment that is allowing this DA to live out their best life and allowing them to proceed in this way when it doesn't feel good to you and the relationship. You have to set boundaries and stop abandoning your needs. You have to get very clear about what your needs are. You have to express them to your partner. Most DAs feel safer when their partner also has outside hobbies and friendships in their own life. That makes them feel safer, and they respect that because they like that autonomy and that speaks to them. So they're usually not going to have a problem with you doing those things. And then if you're worried about them picking up the slack when you're doing those things and taking over some of the things that you're doing, they really strive to appease, to avoid conflict, to keep the peace, and they really do pride themselves on trying to be accomplished and show up well, even though it doesn't always feel like it. That's their internal experience. So a lot of times if you give them very clear directions on how to do things, and should you have to tell a grown man how to do things or a grown partner how to do things? No. But if they were never taught that in childhood and they're a young child teaching themselves how to survive, they also miss those pieces that you may have been lucky enough to have. So give them clear directions on how to pick up those things, exactly what you need to be able to pursue your own dreams, your own hobbies, the things that you want to make happen. If you give them clarity, if you give them a easy guide map to follow, they often will step up and really step into that role and really show up well for you. But you have to give them space to make mistakes and errors and tell them more of what you desire. If you come at them with criticism, they're going to feel defeated and they're going to pull away further and withdraw, and they're going to go back into that space of worrying about what they need, because then they feel dysregulated. So there are things you can do to be able to show up for yourself. Get very clear about your needs, express them in a clear, direct way that without criticism to your DA, in a way that tells them what you desire and how they can show up well for you in that. Give them a place to make errors, to learn along the way. There is a learning curve. And then really be able to go and do the things that you want to do and set boundaries if they're not allowing space for that. Boundaries are so important whenever you are with a dismissive avoidant. If you are a DA, it is your job to gather and collect data on your partner, observe what makes them feel good, ask them questions, get clarity, and then show up in ways to support them. You've got to get out of your selfish space and only looking at your needs and start trying to get more attuned to your partners. That looks like observation, getting curious, lots of questions, having hard conversations to figure out what they need and what doesn't work for them, and then being able to ask questions to get specifics on how to actually step into the role that they need you to step into to show it better for them. If you're a dismissive avoidant and you know you need some growth in this area, or if you are with a dismissive avoidant and you need some help learning to set your boundaries and express your needs and desires and your wants more clearly, I do one-on-one coaching and I do one-on-two coaching.